There are 258 vacant seats. When Prince Harry peered behind the velvet curtain in Melbourne 3 days ago, he saw it. Nor a slow ticket week, nor a few no-shows. In a ballroom that was meant to be the triumphal debut of the million-dollar prince, and what insiders are now referring to as the financial autopsy of the entire Montecito brand, 258 seats covered in black cloth stood like silent headstones. The stats are getting worse, so take another breath. A 300-seat conference room could not be filled by a speaker who 5 years ago earned $1 million for each presentation. Not at the initial $2,400 per seat, not at half that, and not even at the final $500 for a digital pass that would allow you to watch from the comfort of your own home. Even the students said no. Thank you. When the organizers opened the doors and gave free tickets to nearby university students in order to fill the seats on camera. When you eventually witness a total collapse in market demand in a single evening, it looks like that. Quit. Before you move on and think this is simply another clip of royal rumors, I want you to comprehend what you are going to witness. The Australian tour's organizers, Peak Performance Group, provided us with the internal audit. We have the hotel relocation order, the ticket telemetry, the security invoice, and one private document that was sent by encrypted mail at 10 o'clock that morning and caused a British prince to be immediately evicted from his presidential suite at the Park Hyatt. His bags were being carried into a $300 per night room at a typical corporate hotel close to the airport around 2 p.m. on the same day. The hotel lacked a private entrance and a dedicated security floor. In just one morning, a man, a bag, and a career had fallen apart. I want you to keep this question in mind during the entire following minute. In 2021, a speaker may command $1 million for each engagement. In 2026, he would have to pay out of pocket to stand in front of an empty audience. Because when I show you the arithmetic, it's not simply poor. It is disastrous. We will go over the precise dates, the precise numbers, the precise emails, and I can assure you that this story contains a detail about a diplomatic passport and a navy blue folder from the British Embassy that will stop you cold when we get to it. This isn't just the tale of a botched speech, so stay with me. This is the tale of a real-time collapse of an identity, a marriage, and a brand. The last piece of evidence, which raises the possibility that Harry is covertly attempting to return to London, is so compelling that it has not yet been covered by the mainstream media. As it happened, let me set the scene. April 12th, 2026, at 9:15 a.m. The hush in the chilly, sterile backstage area of the Melbourne Convention Centre was overwhelming. Prince Harry stood still, looking through a small opening in the thick velvet curtains. When I read back the staff's description of the event, I still get shivers. He had a deathly pale face. His focus was fixed on the digital dashboard on his main assistant's iPad, which provided him with all the information he needed regarding the last 5 years of his life through, and a single glowing screen. The first pricing point, $2,400 per ticket, was displayed in one column. The next column presented a contrasting picture of the premium tier, which was intended to convey prestige and mirror the costs of Nobel laureates and previous presidents. The cost of a basic digital access pass, the kind where you don't even need to get off your couch, was lowered, first to $1,200, then to $800, and eventually, in a last-ditch effort, to $500. In bright white letters, the status next to that $500 amount said, "Unsold." Not sluggish, not undersold, unsold song. In the few moments before the walk-on began, a member of the production team heard a melancholic conversation. "I was told the demand was there," Harry said, almost to himself. Whereas everyone, the assistant, who was apparently shaking, could only respond with a detached, fact-based response. "Sir, the interest did not convert. We have been running the advertisements for 3 weeks. People simply are not clicking." Let that statement reverberate for a moment, because that is the sound of a career ending in today's speaking economy. A click that never occurs, not a bang, not a scandal. A cursor that goes away from a checkout button after hovering over it. However, this is the point at which it becomes completely crazy. The actual punch did not come from the empty seats, so pay attention to what comes next. At 10 a.m., while Harry was still practicing his talking points in the green room, a single legal notification was sent over encrypted email. This paper can be traced back to Archwell's headquarters located in California. It was an official notification of force majeure. Force majeure is the legal word of last resort, the nuclear option in the world of high-stakes business events, and the provision you activate when the financial situation has gotten so bad that the contract itself needs to be blown apart. The Australian organizers, Peak Performance Group, utilized that phrase to let Harry's team know that the contract was entering what is known as a deficit clause because the income was insufficient to pay basic operational expenses. Put simply, this indicates that the show's revenue is insufficient to cover its own expenses. Additionally, all benefits, costs, and luxuries are immediately eliminated when the show fails to generate enough revenue. Harry's luggage was already being removed from the presidential suite at the Park Hyatt by 2 o'clock that afternoon, while the 42 audience members were still processing his rehashed stories about childhood tragedy. The order was strict and unyielding. Harry was moved in order to lessen the enormous financial damage. Not to another opulent establishment, not to a boutique hotel, but to a typical corporate hotel close to the airport, a location where the coffee served in the room comes in paper cups, the hallway lights buzz softly overhead, and, for the first time in his adult life, no one held a door open for him. However, this particular detail exacerbates the entire narrative. Pay attention to here, as most people make mistakes in this section. They believe all 42 individuals in that room were paying patrons. They weren't. An entirely different story is presented in the internal registration report. 35 of the 42 attendees received free media passes, or industry goodies. In all of Melbourne, only 7 people paid for the Duke of Sussex's speech out of their own pockets. 7. You got that right. Not 7,000, not 700. 7 persons in a 5 million person metropolitan area have their own credit cards. In a city that has historically demonstrated a great deal of love for the British royal family, is nothing compared to what happens next, because the reality is nearly impossible to say out loud when the math of this catastrophe is completely laid out and every line item from the ledger is totaled. The event's expenses were broken out by the Hyatt Regency. Harry received $50,000 for the speech and $62,000 for his private security detail, a group of 4 top contractors, and for 48 hours of deployment. Take your time subtracting. $50,000 to $62,000. Harry was essentially paying $12,000 out of pocket for the right of standing in a room full of empty chairs after taxes, agency commissions, booking fees, and logistical costs. He wasn't the honored guest. He attended his own concert with subsidies. Let me explain that in ways you can relate to. You are aware of those awful weekends. Are there any trips you take where you wind up overspending? This was, but the budget blowout did not include dinners and souvenirs, and the trip was intended to be a worldwide speaking tour. Standing in front of strangers was the difference between making money and losing it. By the end of April 12th, a British prince was in the red on his own keynote. At this point, the self-destruction mechanism is fully activated. He is supporting a lifestyle that is beyond the means of his employment. And the numbers on his phone just did not add up as he sat in that Hyatt Regency bar early on April 13th. $1 million speaker does not turn into a $12,000 loss in a single night. So stay with me as we now need to back up and comprehend how this song happened. There are 3 distinct phases to this established financial death curve, which may be traced nearly clinically. 2021 is the first phase, or the activation phase. The demand for Prince Harry was at an all-time high after his departure from London. He was able to successfully stabilize his brand at $1 million per appearance. Major financial organizations, tech companies, and luxury firms were prepared to pay what industry insiders referred to as the royal tax at the time. They weren't necessarily paying for his professional advice on mental health. They were paying for the photograph, the opportunity to brag at the next shareholder meeting, the closeness to the throne, and the unbridled curiosity of a prince. That tactic was very successful for roughly 18 months. Every market ultimately corrects, and Harry's correction occurred in Phase 2, the repetition phase, 2023 into 2024. The checks cleared, the calendars were full, and the optics held. A document known to industry insiders as the Red List started to circulate behind closed doors at prominent PR firms in New York and London. Numerous people at elite talent agencies have attested to us that corporate feedback was becoming alarmingly constant. The sentiment was devastatingly accurately summed up in one story. A visionary leader was paid for, but we had a session of therapy. Go back and read that. We received a therapy session instead of the visionary leader we paid for. The sound of a market turning is once worth million-dollar checks. The tales of personal hardship, royal grievances, and family separation had become a monotonous cycle. The price point cannot be maintained if the content does not change. Corporate ticket packages stopped moving, buyers were weary, and the gradual loss of brand equity started. This is how brutal the speaking circuit can be. Your demotion is not announced by it. You do not receive a letter from it. It doesn't call a meeting to personally break the bad news. It just stops responding to emails from your agent, stops scheduling you for the spring conference schedule, and ceases sending you invitations to the private dinners where the keynotes for the following year are scheduled. By the time the speaker realizes it, the decrease occurs in the negative space, in the missed calls, and in the empty calendars. It's months too late now. By all accounts, Harry experienced precisely that during the latter part of 2024. The phone didn't ring. The market had already moved on by the time he learned it was not ringing, which immediately led to Phase 3, the disruption period, which lasted from 2025 to 2026. The Peak Performance Group did not want the old Harry when they signed the contract for the summit in Melbourne. They made it clear. According to internal discussions, they expressly asked for data-driven solutions. Research, white papers, and concrete frameworks for workplace health that could support a $2,400 ticket price were what they sought. They were looking for a speaker who could provide CEOs with tools rather than emotions. The sad truth, Harry was unable to supply it. A provision known in the industry as the rescue clause was triggered when the organizers discovered that no fresh information, peer-reviewed studies, or structural frameworks were being provided. The initial million-dollar dream charge was abandoned. It was replaced by a $50,000 fee that was in no way a paycheck. Two different people familiar with the deal claimed that it was a pity fee and a payment to fund his attendance. In order to prevent the event from being completely canceled and embarrassing all those concerned, consider the implications. The cost of the speaker's time was not factored into his fee. In order to avoid having to publicly acknowledge that the draw had failed and refund every ticket, it was intended to keep him inside the building. Since this collapse did not occur overnight, we must now discuss the period that led to it. It took place in a series of distinct, recorded moments, and each one brought the entire business closer to the cliff's brink. January 10th, 2026, in the Archwell boardroom in Montecito. Sources claim that the quarterly financial predictions were presented at a high-level briefing. It was a harsh reality. In private, insiders were referring to the decline in cash reserves as a red zone alarm. The lack of a significant new high-value contract, the burn rate of the lifestyle, the security expenses, the legal bills, and all came together to create an unavoidable cash issue. The decision to approve the Australia tour was made in that room under extreme pressure, not because they were passionate about workplace mental health, but rather because they needed money quickly. The hammer then dropped. The Crown Estate sent an official 3-page notification on February 15, 2026, which completely altered the business's financial situation. It was evident from the document. The United Kingdom's residual logistical assistance and security subsidies were formally and permanently stopped, even for foreign business travel, with immediate effect. This meant that Harry's business expenses had suddenly tripled. Every dollar of his elite bodyguard, every private aircraft charter, and every encrypted communication line was now his sole responsibility. Already underfunded, the Australia tour was losing money before it had even begun. The Melbourne marketing machine got going by April 1st. The Prince's Insight, with a certain amount of tone-deaf bravado, was the title of the event. The initial pricing's conceit was a deadly error. Each ticket costs $2,400. The group was placing a wager on the ancient royal enchantment. People were mistaken to believe that they would pay more simply to be in the same room as a duke. The internal sales report released to investigators by April 8th, 4 days prior to the meeting, revealed a figure so low it was nearly unbelievable. The general public had only purchased 15 tickets. 15. The local organizers felt a surge of terror. Thousands of dollars worth of tickets were given away for free to nearby university students and nonprofit employees in a desperate effort to salvage face. And this is the timeline's most embarrassing detail. They were rejected even by the pupils. The prince's insight was not something they wanted for free, much less $2,000. The room was not filled despite the free ticket offer. Consider what that indicates about the market's current assessment of his importance. Even if the product had a negative price, people wouldn't buy it. Harry took the stage at 9:30 a.m. on April 12th. He anticipated a thunderous round of applause to cover up the vacant seats. Rather, he was greeted by a terrifying silence. There will be no standing ovation, just the muted noise of 42 people moving around in their seats. One witness reported hearing a clear, audible whisper from the rear of the room. "Why does he remain here at all? Why does he remain here at all?" For words that most likely hurt more than any headline the tabloids could come up with. Because a journalist did not say those things. A troll did not tweet them. In the center of a city that was meant to welcome him, a stranger sitting in a half-empty ballroom shouted them out loud. The public's verdict, delivered in real time, is that whisper. Additionally, there isn't any or public relations reaction to it. A whisper cannot be sued. A whisper cannot be corrected by a declaration. All you can do is take it in, carry it with you, and wonder how many other people in how many other rooms are thinking the same thing but just keeping it to themselves. Hold on, though, because something else was going on in Sydney across the nation as Harry was taking in that humiliation in Melbourne. This shows a second, even more uncomfortable element of this story. Since Meghan Markle wasn't traveling to Melbourne, she was present. She was remaining in the same spot. This is the spare's loneliness. Harry is temporarily grounded, according to our sources in Melbourne. His private travel plans are on hold for payment. The $62,000 security bill has completely consumed the $50,000 fee, and the private aircraft business is allegedly refusing to take off until the outstanding amount is paid. He's not just heartbroken. In essence, he is stuck in a city that did not want to hear him. Additionally, our sources claim that the tour's next destination has already been discreetly taken off the event website. No press release, no announcement, just a URL that was once active but is now inactive. In the meantime, the scene on April 13th at 1 in the morning perfectly conveys the severity of this decline. Harry was seen sitting by himself at a dimly lit corner booth by a witness at the hotel bar, which is typically crowded with wealthy foreign tourists. He wasn't going over his speech. Notes. He was not keeping an eye on the news cycle. He was staring at his phone screen, which the witness claimed was playing a loop of old YouTube videos from the 2018 royal wedding and the Platinum Jubilee. A loop, repeatedly. Take a time to visualize that. Alone in a Melbourne hotel bar, a prince observes the version of himself that existed before to everything collapsing. The entire apparatus of a millennium-old organization, including the gold, security, devotion, and certainty, is encircled in those historical films. And then turning away from the television to see a half-empty bar in a city that had not bothered to pack a ballroom to hear him talk earlier that day. It's not just a horrible night. That individual is facing the whole reversal of his own life. I'm sure that both of us have experienced a scaled-down version of this moment. The silent, unattractive moment when you glance over an old picture, message, or video on your phone. When you become aware of how much your life has changed from what you thought it would be by now. After everyone has gone to bed, the majority of us experience that moment in the dark of a bedroom, at a kitchen table, or in a parked automobile. Harry's moment at a Melbourne hotel bar was captured on video while bystanders watched, and this is the price of living a public life. You are not the owner of your worst nights. Whoever is observing owns them. But the most revealing information comes from a high-ranking employee in the hotel's premium services department. Internal logs show that Harry called a single Sydney number 17 times in a row between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock on the night of the botched speech. He tried to contact his wife for more than 2 hours. The outcome? Complete silence on the radio. 17 calls went unanswered. Meghan was allegedly off the grid at a special invitation-only debut as he was recovering from the worst professional disgrace of his life. for an upscale jewelry company in a remote penthouse in Sydney. There was no schedule issue. This was a surgical strike in public relations. Give me an opportunity to sit inside that number. 17 calls in a 2-hour period to the same individual. Are you aware of the external manifestation of such type of behavior? The man seemed to be experiencing a crisis. The one person who was meant to be his companion was the object of a man's desperate reach. Additionally, sources claim that the phone was not accidentally left on a nightstand during those conversations. It was being deliberately disregarded. Based on real-time statistics, Meghan's team decided that it would be more expensive to be connected to the Melbourne tragedy than it would be to console Harry. According to our sources in the Sydney event circuit, Meghan's staff had been keeping an eye on the Melbourne ticket. In the coldest terms possible, the math advised, let him handle it alone. Telemetry for a minimum of 14 days. They were aware of the disastrous numbers. They were aware that the $50,000 failure would make headlines this week. Meghan made a strategic decision to reduce losses by staying in Sydney, where she was surrounded by high-net-worth influencers and luxury. Meghan's team used what insiders refer to as the principle of contagion avoidance in the harsh world of contemporary branding to make sure her image was not recorded in the same frame as an empty ballroom or a spouse who described as sad. The division is strategic as well as physical. One half of the brand is turning back toward the exclusive high society circles of Soho House memberships and luxury sponsorships, while the other is frantically attempting to sell vulnerability to a phantom audience. The next item to be liquidated from the Archwell portfolio might be the United Front. This is the question that keeps me up at night. Where do you go when the person you gave your all for declines to pick up the phone amid your most public setback? A string of desperate emails made to a law firm in April 13th. Just before dawn in London. Our sources report that Harry is searching for a means to return to a life that he once claimed to despise. But hold on, because what makes this story nearly intolerable to deal with is the contrast I am going to show you, the one between his circumstances and the one back in London. London's financial ledgers are revealing a tale of unparalleled success. The Royal Collection Trust in London published its mid-April quarterly report the week Harry took the stage in front of 42 individuals. The information is astounding. There has been an amazing 400% increase in revenue from visitors to websites dedicated to Catherine, the Princess of Wales. 400 is a tidal wave rather than a minor increase. The public is swarming the royal gates in unprecedented numbers while Harry struggles to distribute a $500 digital permit. The desire for monarchy has not decreased. Simply put, it has gathered around several individuals. The part that has to hurt the most is, Kate isn't performing anything ostentatious if you're Harry. She doesn't appear on podcasts. Netflix does not include her. She doesn't discuss personal pain in interviews. The market is paying her in real time for just carrying out the quiet, disciplined duties of royal duty that Harry and Meghan frequently characterized as oppressive when they left. 400% more money was made by carrying out the exact action that the Sussexes avoided. It's not a coincidence. That is the market making its decision based on millions of individual decisions. Grievances are not as valuable as duty. Disclosure is not as valuable as restraint. Independence is not as valuable as institutions. Every dollar spent at a royal collection location is a little silent vote. Harry is losing that race by a huge margin that he is unable to control. And the more you dig, the harsher the numbers become. Harry's brand trust index has reached an all-time low, plummeting into the negative 50 zone for the first time in history, according to the YouGov Consumer Confidence Index for April 2026, the gold standard for public image. That's not a bad poll for a public figure. That is a sentence of commercial death. It indicates that he is actively mistrusted by more people than trusted, by a significant amount. In the speaking business, the figure is not just embarrassing but also disqualifying. However, the International Association of Speakers hallways are where the true harm is occurring. This is the public speaking industry's global hub. Our sources in that organization claim that Harry's position has been formally reduced from Tier 1 global keynote to high-risk lead. This is like to a credit rating being reduced to junk status in the speaking world. When the organization designates a speaker as high risk, booking revenues disappear, insurance prices for the event soar, and corporate attorneys begin writing escape clauses prior to the signing of any new contract. This leads us to the moral turpitude process, which is the most perilous aspect of the entire collapse. This is a common yet deadly clause found in speaking and high-level endorsement contracts. If an individual's marketable authority collapses or their reputation drops below a specific public decency standard, it permits a corporation to unilaterally terminate an agreement without paying a single cent in compensation. At least 2 significant international sponsors are presently examining this particular condition in their current contracts with Archwell, according to our inquiry. 2 international sponsors. The reasoning is brutally straightforward. The brand itself is being harmed by association if the public no longer respects the speaker's authority. The kill switch has been activated. Harry is no longer seen as a change agent. In the cold jargon of corporate risk management, he is viewed as a financial burden. It is impossible to avoid the analysis. The industry hasn't changed its back on the royal family of Britain. Without a palace, it has abandoned the prince. By definition, royalty depends on a well-maintained sense of mystery, obligation, and institutional support. Harry unintentionally surrendered his worth for a commodity that the market is currently rejecting when he exchanged that mystery for a microphone and a string of personal complaints. The price drops to 0 once is no longer mysterious. What matters is what the name still means, not how well known it is. Additionally, the name is currently losing its meaning in real time as of April 2026. I want you to sit with this part, though. The terrifying detail I initially promised you. The one that has stayed hidden up to this point, as far as I can tell. Recall the morning of April 10th. A black car from the British consulate pulled up to the Montecito gates 2 days prior to the incident in Melbourne. A verified report about the contents of a navy blue folder that was delivered that day has been sent to us. On page 14 of that folder, one chilly directive is tucked away in the administrative update section. Money is not mentioned. Titles are not mentioned. It does not mention security arrangements or royal protocols. It is a formal notification of the permanent revocation of the diplomatic passport issued to the individual identified as Henry Charles Albert David. Go back and read that. Permanent revocation of the diplomatic passport. This is the ultimate security severance. Without a diplomatic passport, the prince is no longer an international envoy. He is a private citizen, subject to standard immigration weights, subject to standard visa limits, susceptible to 0 state protection. He now stands in line with everyone else when he arrives in a nation. He acts like a tourist when completing a customs form. He is at the mercy of the receiving country when he crosses a border, not as a guardian of the British Crown. That one administrative change buried on page 14 of a document most people will never see marks the silent, total, ultimate disintegration of his old identity. The palace did not issue a press release. It did not hold a briefing. It did not announce anything at all. It simply, through a bureaucratic act, cut the final thread of institutional privilege he had been holding on to. And that, I suppose, is why he was so upset that morning in Melbourne. Not just because of the empty seats, not just because of the deficit clause, not just because of the hotel downgrade, but because deep down he already knew. The foundation had been torn out from under him 2 days before he ever stepped onto that stage. Imagine the psychological impact of entering a stage with only a letter informing you that your native country's diplomatic protection has been discreetly turned off. That dude is not getting ready to deliver a major address. While the walls behind him are being broken down brick by brick, that man is attempting to maintain a facade. And he was unable to utter it out. He was unable to explain to the 42 people in the crowd. The documents in his bag indicated one thing, but he had to act like a worldwide thought leader while standing there in front of the lights. What comes next, then? I'll take you through the 3 scenarios that insiders are now modeling. The first scenario is the deliberate disappearance. Hushed discussions about the next performances in Brisbane and Perth have already been reported by our sources within the Australian tour circuit. Within the next 48 hours, Archwell will issue an official statement blaming fatigue, unanticipated health issues, or obligations to family. This is the traditional smokescreen used in public relations. The reorganization is already under progress behind the scenes. The brand's live speaking division is essentially extinct. Archewell will probably completely turn to behind-the-scenes content creation in order to survive, trying to sell stories from the shadows since the man on stage is no longer marketable. The second scenario is the legal ramifications. The organizers, Peak Performance Group, who took a chance on the royal aura, now have a huge disadvantage. Brand magnetism is a measurable asset in the realm of high-stakes contracts. An organizer may file a breach of contract claim if they can demonstrate that the speaker's team misrepresented their current market draw. A multi-million-dollar clawback lawsuit could be on the horizon, in which sponsors demand their money back, claiming that the promised worldwide participation was not fulfilled. This would be the last straw for a company that is already struggling with liquidity. The third scenario is the silent capitulation. To be honest, I find this to be the most emotionally impactful. The U-turn back to London, financially exhausted, defeated, and isolated. In exchange for a grace and favor, Harry might have to agree to what insiders refer to as the Windsor terms, which include a total retreat from public life, living, and reintegrating into the institutional system. The Montecito ideal would be completely abandoned, and the failure of the independence experiment would be publicly acknowledged. Furthermore, it appears that scenario 3 may be closer to reality than anyone in Sussex circles cares to acknowledge based on the desperate emails sent to a London law firm just before dawn on April 13th. Imagine the true appearance of that reconciliation. It's not a red carpet event. It's not a picture taken from Buckingham Palace's balcony. In exchange for a roof over his head and a tenuous guarantee of family contact to his children's cousins, he gives up commercial rights, speaking rights, narrative rights, and interview rights in this quiet, highly negotiated, legally complex contract. 5 years ago, Harry would have burnt this kind of paper on principle, but based on the trend of all the indicators we have examined, it might be the document he is practically pleading with the London lawyers to help him obtain. If it occurs, it would be the only, most striking turnaround of a public narrative I have seen while covering this family in my professional life. In the end, a man who established a 5-year media empire based on the idea that the royal institution was the issue would be pleading with to save him from the market it had warned he was unprepared for, which is most likely. Scenario 1 is already in motion based on the present trajectory. Even while the industry is aware of the facts, the deliberate disappearance gives a face-saving escape. However, there is no conflict between situations 2 and 3. A man running out of chessboard moves is one who has a revoked diplomatic passport, an unresponsive wife, a pending lawsuit, and an empty ballroom in Melbourne. The question of whether the Montecito brand is in danger is no longer relevant. The question is whether the individual working for that brand still has faith in it. Because when the sponsors begin examining exit terms, the audience ceases to attend, and the wife stops taking calls, the only thing left. The speaker's resolve is a variable, and conclude that cannot be invoiced in contrast to security contracts. Let me return to the question I posed at the outset. How does a speaker worth millions of dollars turn into a $12,000 loss? You now know the answer, which is that it occurs gradually before happening all at once. Repetition turns into exhaustion, complaints turn into noise, institutional departures turn into business liabilities, and 17 ignored calls on a night that ought to have been a victory are all examples of how it occurs. Harry is hardly the first public figure to realize that merit and celebrity are not the same thing. He might be the most well-known example of what occurs when someone mixes up the two, but he won't be the last. You do not get to keep both when you exchange the crown's enigma for a microphone. Eventually, you have to make a decision, and the Melbourne market made the decision for him. This has a message that extends well beyond the royal family. Every viewer of this has, at some time in their lives, they have been tempted to exchange long-term leverage for short-term attention, to exchange the loud, instantaneous applause for the silent, long-lasting asset. After the ovation subsides, that exchange resembles Harry's Melbourne ballroom, a room filled with empty chairs. A $50,000 fee that is insufficient to pay the security bill, a passport that no longer opens the doors it once did, a wife who refuses to answer the phone, and an old Jubilee video that plays on repeat at 1 in the morning because it's the only place where the person you used to be still exists. Nothing will get you to stop and consider what you are giving up in your own life. I want to hear from you now. Tell me what you think was Harry's worst error in the comments section below. Was it leaving London? Was it the never-ending grievance interviews? Was it putting Hollywood handshakes ahead of regal establishments? Was it the belief that one's own suffering would always be a commodity that could be sold? I've read every single comment, and I'm curious about your position. Do me two quick favors if this inquiry awakened your eyes. The strongest signal you can give the algorithm to promote this type of independent reporting to more viewers is to hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe, as our next in-depth analysis of the Archewell exit strategy and the frantic emails to the London law firm are now in the final stages of editing. Then click the following video that appears on your computer. I can assure you that what follows will completely change the way you perceive this narrative. Remain with me. The only thing that cannot be hushed is the truth. And in this instance, the truth is just starting to speak.